You're surrounded by noise, people, screens, messages. The world never stops speaking. But have you ever noticed how terrified you feel when it finally goes quiet? You check your phone. Again, you turn on music, open an app, call someone you don't even want to talk to. Not because you're bored, but because you're afraid. Afraid of that one moment, when there's no one else to distract you, no conversation to hide behind, and you're left with the one person you've been avoiding, yourself. Carl Jung believed that solitude isn't empty, it's full of everything we've buried. Your pain, your longing, your repressed anger, your unmet needs, the shadow side of you that was never allowed to speak. You think you're afraid of being alone, but what you're really afraid of is being seen by your own soul. Because deep down you know there are parts of you you've never dared to face. Old wounds, forgotten dreams, masks you've worn for so long you've forgotten your real face. And in the silence, they all return. So you scroll, you escape, you run. Not from the world, but from your own reflection. But what if your fear of being alone isn't a weakness, but an invitation? An invitation to finally come home, to the forgotten parts of you, to the truth you keep silencing, to the wholeness waiting on the other side of stillness. This is what Carl Jung wanted you to see, not the fear, but what the fear is pointing to. Why are we so afraid to be alone? Not just lonely, but alone. Alone without noise, alone without stimulation, alone without anyone watching, liking, commenting, responding. In today's world, solitude feels like punishment. We've wired ourselves to believe that if we're not constantly connected, we're somehow falling behind, forgotten, unloved, invisible. But Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychological minds of the 20th century, saw something else entirely. To him, being alone wasn't a flaw in the human condition. It was the beginning of real transformation. Because when you're alone, there's nowhere left to hide. Jung believed that inside every human being is a vast inner landscape, filled with memories, symbols, instincts, and forgotten truths. And yet, most of us will live our entire lives without ever exploring it. Why? Because we fear what we might find. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." This video isn't about loneliness in the conventional sense. It's about a deeper fear, the fear of turning inward, the fear of encountering your own unconscious mind, the fear of solitude not as absence, but as a mirror. And in that mirror, you might see someone you don't fully understand, a stranger, a shadow, or your real self. In the next few minutes, we're going to dive into the heart of Jungian psychology to understand what's really behind your fear of being alone, why modern life keeps you running from silence, and how learning to sit with yourself could be the most radical act of healing you ever attempt. So if part of you feels tired of pretending, tired of chasing, tired of performing, then this journey is for you. Because according to Jung, the path to wholeness doesn't begin in the crowd, it begins in the quiet. To understand why Carl Jung believed solitude was so essential and why so many of us fear it, you first need to understand who he was. Carl Gustav Jung wasn't just a psychiatrist, he was a pioneer of the human soul. Born in Switzerland in 1875, he studied under Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. But while Freud focused heavily on childhood, sexuality and neuroses, Jung went further, deeper. He asked a more spiritual question. Who are we beneath the surface? Jung believed that every human being has two lives, the life we live outwardly, what people see, what we show, and the life we live inwardly, our dreams, fears, instincts, desires, wounds. He called this inner world the unconscious, and believed it holds most of who we truly are. But modern people, he said, are strangers to it. We identify with the persona, the mask we wear for the world. We bury anything that doesn't fit. Anger, sadness, vulnerability, spiritual longing. Those buried parts don't disappear. They become what Jung called the shadow. The shadow isn't evil, it's simply unseen. It's everything you've disowned about yourself, the insecurities you deny, the emotions you suppress, the truths you're afraid to admit, even to yourself. And when you're alone, you come face to face with it. This is why Jung saw solitude not as loneliness, but as an opportunity, a gateway to self-discovery. He said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. But looking inside takes courage, because it means peeling back the layers, beyond your name, beyond your social identity, beyond your achievements, and asking, who am I when the world stops watching?" In a society obsessed with productivity, performance, and public image, Jung's teachings feel almost radical. He wasn't offering quick fixes or feel-good slogans. He was offering something deeper. Individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole by integrating all the parts of yourself, light and dark. And that process? It doesn't begin in a crowd. It begins when you're finally alone. You're not alone with yourself. You're alone with your shadow. Most people think they're afraid of being lonely, but Carl Jung showed us something deeper. We're not afraid of being without others. We're afraid of being with ourselves. When you strip away the noise, the likes, the chats, the distractions, you're not met with peace. You're met with discomfort. Why? Because beneath the surface of your conscious mind lies the shadow, the part of you you've been trained to ignore, all the emotions you weren't allowed to feel, all the thoughts you were told were wrong, all the parts of yourself you judged, rejected, buried. They live in the unconscious, and when you're alone, they begin to speak. That anxiety you feel in silence, that uneasiness when you're by yourself, it's the voice of your shadow, finally rising to the surface. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, the longer you avoid facing what's inside, the more power it has over you. So no, you're not just afraid of being alone, you're afraid of what being alone reveals. You've built a persona that can't survive without an audience. From a young age, we learn how to perform, we adapt, we show the world only the parts of us that are accepted, applauded, rewarded. That outer mask is what Jung called the persona. Your persona is your public identity. It's who you become to fit in, to be loved, to survive. But here's the problem. The more you identify with the mask, the more disconnected you become from your authentic self. When you're constantly on, constantly shaping yourself to please others, being alone feels like death. Because in solitude, the mask falls off. No one's watching, no one's applauding, no one's reacting, and suddenly, you don't know who you are anymore. Jung said, the persona is a mask intended on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. So when you're afraid to be alone, ask yourself, is it solitude you fear meant or the absence of your performance? You've rejected the shadow, instead of integrating it. Modern culture teaches us to be positive, stay strong, and rise above. But Jung warned that this obsession with light often creates a dangerous imbalance. Every light casts a shadow, and if you deny it, you split yourself in two. The shadow is not evil. It is neutral, raw, and honest. It contains your deepest instincts, your creativity, your buried truth. But because we associate it with shame or weakness, we push it away. And here's the paradox. The more you suppress it, the more it controls you. In relationships, it shows up as jealousy. In work, as perfectionism. In life, as anxiety, numbness, rage, or depression. Jung believed that healing comes not by avoiding the shadow, but by integrating it, by saying, this too is me. So when you sit alone and feel sadness, anger, or emptiness, that's not failure. That's your shadow inviting you to finally be whole. Modern society pathologizes solitude, and it's killing us. We live in a world that's more connected than ever, yet more people feel empty, anxious, and lost. Why? Because we've confused connection with distraction. We've forgotten how to be with ourselves. Solitude has become suspicious, stillness has become scary, and silence unbearable. Jung understood this before the digital age even began. He wrote, Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. We've built a culture where everyone is shouting, but no one is listening, especially to themselves. And the irony? True connection with others only happens when you've connected with yourself first. Because if you don't know who you are, you'll keep attracting relationships that reflect your wounds instead of your truth. So Jung's message was simple, but radical. If you want to know peace, if you want to stop running, if you want to stop feeling like something's missing, you must turn inward. And that begins with being alone. Now let's step out of theory and into the real world. Because Jung's ideas weren't just for the therapist's office or dusty philosophy books. They're alive in our daily lives, in subtle patterns we barely notice. Let's meet 3 people. You might recognize them. One of them might even be you. 1. The scroller, addicted to escape. Emma is 26. She wakes up and checks her phone within 5 seconds. Before her feet hit the floor, she's already inside someone else's life. Likes, reels, replies. She doesn't even realize she hasn't felt silence in years. At night, when everything slows down, she can't bear it. So she scrolls, endlessly, because silence brings thoughts. Thoughts bring feelings, and feelings bring memories she hasn't processed. Regrets, fears, longing. Her fear of being alone isn't about boredom. It's about confrontation. Her inner world is a room she locked up long ago. Jung would say Emma isn't addicted to her phone. She's addicted to avoiding herself. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. 2. The clinger, afraid of emptiness without others. James is 31. He's always in a relationship, not because they're meaningful, but because being single feels like being nothing. When he's alone, a hollow feeling creeps in. Not sadness exactly, just a vague sense of not existing. He needs someone to text, someone to orbit, someone to reflect his worth back to him. But it never lasts, because he keeps trying to fill an inner void with outer attention. He doesn't know it, but he's deeply identified with his persona, the charming, funny, needed version of himself. When no one's around, the mask fades, and he doesn't know who's underneath. Jung would say James fears solitude because it threatens the identity he's built his life around. But until James learns to sit in his own presence without shrinking, he'll keep searching for love in places that can't give it. 3. The overachiever, running from stillness. Priya is 37. On paper, she's a success story, driven, respected, productive. But her calendar is full for a reason. Stillness makes her anxious. She says she loves her work, but she works late every night, even when she doesn't need to. She avoids vacations, hates weekends, fears rest. Because when she stops moving, she feels a tightness in her chest, a restlessness in her soul. Underneath all the awards is a woman terrified of insignificance, terrified of what might rise to the surface if she slowed down. Regret, maybe, or grief, or the realization that she's built her life around achievement, not meaning. Priya has exiled her shadow in the name of discipline. She wears excellence like armor, but Jung would gently ask her, what's the cost of not being whole? Bringing it together, whether it's through the screen, the relationship, or the job. We all have our ways of escaping the mirror of solitude. Carl Jung didn't shame these defenses. He simply invited us to see them for what they are, not flaws, but signs. Signs that we're out of balance, that there's a part of us we've left behind, a truth we've silenced, a self we haven't met. And that self, it's waiting, not in the noise, but in the quiet, let's pause. You've just walked through the deeper layers of solitude, from fear to meaning. Now let's draw out the truths that Carl Jung would want you to remember. These aren't just ideas, they're inner compasses, clues for anyone brave enough to stop running and start listening. 1. Your fear of being alone is not weakness, it's a doorway. Solitude strips away everything artificial, and that feels terrifying at first, but the fear is a sign that something meaningful lies beneath the surface. Every time you resist stillness, ask yourself, what part of me am I afraid to meet? Jung would say, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That journey begins when the noise ends. 2. The parts of you that make you uncomfortable are not your enemies. The sadness, the insecurity, the shame, the longing. These are not things to conquer, they're things to understand. They are fragments of you, left behind, silenced, unaccepted. Jung taught us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. True healing isn't found in denying the shadow, but in integrating it, with compassion. 3. You are more than your persona. You're not just your job title, not just your looks, not just your social presence. Those are roles, masks, tools. But underneath all that is something sacred, yourself. Jung believed that the greatest tragedy is not failure. It's never knowing who you truly are. And you can't know that self without solitude. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. 4. Facing your inner world is not selfish, it's the beginning of wholeness. Modern life teaches us to hustle, to please, to perform. But Jung's psychology reminds us that without integration we're fractured. Every time you choose to sit in silence, every time you journal your thoughts, every time you face your discomfort instead of avoiding it, you're reclaiming a lost part of your soul. You're choosing depth over distraction, truth over performance, wholeness over appearance. And that is not small. That is spiritual. 5. Solitude isn't isolation. It's connection with your inner source. You don't need to fear being alone, because in that stillness you are never truly alone. You are with your breath, with your heart, with the ancient symbols and truths your unconscious has been carrying for a lifetime. Solitude is not absence. It is presence of the deepest kind. Let this be the shift from running to returning, from avoiding to awakening, from fearing solitude to honoring it. If something stirred inside you during this video, don't brush it off. That stillness you felt, that lump in your throat, that quiet moment when you saw a part of yourself reflected on the screen, that wasn't just content. That was your soul responding. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to dive headfirst into your unconscious or decode every shadow, but you can start small, maybe tonight, instead of reaching for your phone. You sit in silence for 5 minutes, just you, your breath, and the truth you've been avoiding. Maybe you journal. Maybe you take a walk without music. Maybe you just listen to what arises in the quiet. Carl Jung believed that healing is not linear. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been, beneath the noise, the masks, and the fear. So here's your invitation. Don't run. Return. Return to yourself. Return to the solitude that heals instead of haunts. Return to the path that leads inward, not outward. And if you found value in this journey, consider subscribing. Not just for more videos, but to be reminded that it's okay to go deeper. It's okay to question. It's okay to feel. You're not broken for struggling. You're not weak for being afraid. You're just human, and maybe, just maybe, this is where your real story begins.